G'day and welcome to this week's segment of Farm Yarns, where we dive behind the audio to find out who inspires our guests, what motivates them, what they would like to debunk, and also what resources they lean on to get the most out of their agri business. So let's get down to it. Farm Yarns. Right, Khory, you joined us earlier on in the week on the Farms Advice full episode, talking everything carbon, how it's working up in Queensland and how it may be able to work for other farmers. But in this episode, Farm Yarn segment, we get to know a little bit about Khory, what drives him, what inspires him, and what sort of resources you rely on. But before we get down to that, we'll kick it off and just see what's your morning routine? What's it like for you?
Morning routine. Yeah. Well, because I live on the beach now, I get that luxury lifestyle. I didn't have it for a very, very long time working away in remote locations. I was last up in Weipa, so I did some hard yards. So I'm sort of trying to relax a little bit more now, Jack. I do get up reasonably early, not early, not crack of dawn, but around 6 o'clock or something, I head to the beach. I got this pup, this border collie, and I take her for a little run up and down the beach. I try and do some yoga. I've been getting into yoga lately, and some meditation quickly, just to, well, it's more a priming, not really meditation. I'm not very good at meditation. Priming is more like setting your brain up, like practicing gratitude and envisioning and setting your brain up for the day. Then I go and get a coffee, and I sit down and journal and what I'm going to do for the day, and I plan out my next trips, where I'm going to go, North Queensland or South Australia or wherever I'm going next. So it's really like it's bloody fantastic morning routine. Like that honey badger says, it's like if you win the morning, you win the day kind of thing. And I've sort of taken on that approach now. It's bloody it's a good lifestyle on the beach, but I get the itch to travel to these cattle stations. So everything that I'm doing is sort of prepping for that, and I get quite excited for those trips.
100% sounds quite good and a little refresher too, jumping into the ocean and getting straight into it for your day. But for yourself, who inspires you personally or it could be professionally as well?
Yeah, I think agriculturally, a bloke called David Ward. I don't know if you've heard of him before. He's based in Dubbo, and his father was Bruce Ward, who started SLM, Sustainable Land Management Company, as being run by the Finlaysons now. But he came from a very holistic sort of agriculture background, where he was thought holistically, and he taught me those regenerative principles in those early days when I had no idea about it. When I just started in carbon farming, I was sort of on these properties, and he introduced it. We sat around a campfire one night with a couple of rums, and he talked about the African savanna lands and how the buffalo moved around and the elephants and broke up, trampled the ground, and that regenerated areas, and they were trying to replicate that on their property using those rotational grazing sort of patterns. And my mind was just like, and ever since, he'd been he still is a good mate, but been an agricultural mentor of mine, and helped me through my sort of not only media career, but also my professional career. So he's definitely one. I outside of that, I tend to look up to other people for advice, bigger media personalities like Tony Robbins and Brene Brown, those type of speakers, which I take pointers from. I think Bruce Lee is a good example of someone who came the best fighter in the world, not only because he was focused on one discipline, because he took many different aspects from many different disciplines and fighters across the world, and that's how he became the best. So I try and take something that I like out of each person and trying to create a more full version of myself, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And that just transpires into what the Farms Advice episodes are about, just taking one key element out of each sort of episode and implement it, or if not, use it into your own motivation to push you to do more. Maybe you don't like their idea at all and you're like, bugger that, I'll go the other way and do it a little bit better. But however you take it, as long as you take it on board and make something of it as well. And
yeah, exactly.
moving into in 60 seconds, tell me your first memory that you had on farm, maybe your own farm or someone else's in the family. What was that for you?
My first memory that I've really taken into my life, I guess, was a horse that I had called Snip, and no one else liked him. He was a sour little horse. Every time you got on him, he'd pig root and do all these bad things, really. And so everyone thought he was just a sport brat. But when we were mustering, we spent every day on the horse for 2 or 3 weeks straight. So and Dad put me on that horse. I was the best rider at the time. I was the eldest. There was no other horses. I had to get used to this horse. So I thought he was a sport brat too. But then, 2 or 3 weeks on a horse every day, you start to get to know the horse a little bit and he starts to settle down. And he was incredibly brilliant at chasing cattle through the bush. Like, he would focus so much on these cattle and just glide through the trees. He was the safest horse that we had. And so that I learned from that is that his behavior was just surface level behavior. If I got to the depths, if I got beneath that and tried to bring out the best in him, then he 100%, and Dad said it, and my brother said it to me at a later stage, that he became the best horse that we had, the safest horse, and the best mustering horse. It's like, so I try and that's the story that I remember of my horse called Snip, and I try and bring that into my life, is bring out the best in not only myself but in others.
Great stuff. What color was Snip?
He was a dark brown, black with a little white snip on his nose. Very original.
We've had 3 guests on here, and they've all had grey horses growing up. So I was thinking he might have been grey, keeping the trend going. But good on you, Snip. Great story.
Yeah.
But for yourself, like, I like to debunk a few myths with the guests and maybe about what you're doing with carbon farming. I know out there's a shitload of myths going around, and as you said, don't go to the pub and ask anyone what they should be doing. What's a myth you'd like to debunk?
But I think we already talked about it a little bit, but the lock it up and leave it type approach. Land is not to be locked up; it's to be managed. I think that's probably the biggest myth out there at the moment, is that we have to manage country. I mean, there's this rewilding concept going on at the moment, and I love David Attenborough, but I think he did the entire world a disservice when he introduced that rewilding concept. Is that we've been trying that in national parks. That's not a new concept. I mean, the rewilding concept has been tried in national parks for decades now, where we just leave land and it's not managed for fire or anything really, and then all of a sudden you get these massive bushfires like we saw in 2019, 2020. And so that concept is now too idealistic. When people, if you hear this rewilding concept, it just does not work. We have to manage country, and the carbon projects can help manage country. They're not lock it up and leave it type approach. It is a hands-on management, and we need farmers, we need landholders to do that. We will always need them. That's the myth I'd like to bust.
That's a bloody good one as well. And one thing you'd like to change about Australian agriculture, quite broadly speaking, what would that be?
Oh, oh,
Could be small,
I
could
want to tell, yeah, I want to tell the truth here. A lot of people probably aren't going to like me for this. I do not like the industrialized process. I don't like feedlots, and that hard, fast, sort of focused and concentrated impact that we have in agriculture. I don't think we ever should have brought livestock into that feedlot space. I think animals in general, they need to be integrated into land, into ecosystems, and we need to learn how to do that better. That industrialized approach, I don't think we ever should have done that. I think we need to move away from it. I know there's going to be a lot of people that go, oh, I hate you for this, but yeah, I've got to tell the truth here. I think we need to move away from that type of model completely and into one that is more regenerative, and that's through landscape management.
Yep, good stuff. And also for yourself, what you're doing, expertise, sharing land care. What's the best way to pass on some land care techniques, principles within Australian agriculture to the next generation, or even this generation, just so we can have that start now approach?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those 5 principles that I sort of said earlier, the maximizing the solar plant cycle, maximizing the water cycle, the nutrient cycling, and creating a diverse range of ecosystem species, not just monoculture now. I mean, that's a really good one. Uh, Charlie Arnott says it best probably with the 5th principle is that you need to change the paddock between your ears before you change the paddock itself, meaning that you like the more information in that regenerative sort of holistic farming space that you can um, get into to start learning how to do better practices, the better. The more aligned that you can be with nature, not against it, the better. But in terms of like practical things that you can do every day, slowing down water flow, looking at where water flows around your landscape and slowing it down, that slows down the amount of topsoil loss that you're going to get, amount of erosion, etc. You can do that through a number of different ways, digging small holes to keep that and contour banks, or putting logs and creating these leaky weir systems throughout your sort of gullies that you have, so you can create these little wetland sort of niches, and that banks up your water. It increases your soil carbon and increases your vegetation capacity as well. The main aim that I would say, that the main principle is don't allow any bare ground. Like, aim for 100% vegetation coverage, not just pasture, but you want a diverse range of tree species as well. And for tree species in forest cover, you want around that 20 to 40%. That is the scientific value for maximum. Like, if you're looking down from bird's eye view on a forest, you want about 20%, 20 to 40% forest coverage for maximum agricultural productivity. I think the age-old advice of every good tree is a dead tree is definitely not true, agriculturally or ecologically speaking. We have to reverse that mindset. And anything that you can do to sort of keep your vegetation coverage and slow down that water flow, hold more water in your landscape, is only going to be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And a bit of a tongue twister to get into it is, if you weren't doing what you were doing, what would you be doing?
Oh, uh, acting. I think I've always enjoyed getting in front and acting the camera and acting like a larrikin. So I'd probably go into acting. Not that I'd be any good at it, but
Different one, but
something
yeah,
like that.
we're always looking for some cracking Aussie actors to make it in the broad show as well. So that's a good one. But for yourself, learning about carbon farming or any sort of principles you've learned along your way, what's your resource to lean towards? Maybe a book, maybe YouTube, a person. What was it? A community?
Yeah, Zach Bush is a really good one. If anyone listens to his podcast, he's very good in that regenerative space. And also Project Drawdown. If you go to their website, Project Drawdown, there's a whole list of regenerative solutions there, the silvo pasture and agroforestry and all these different things that you can do on land to maximize not only your income, but agricultural productivity, as well as start to reverse the global warming effects, etc. So, I mean, yeah, that's a really good resource. And any type of podcast like that, like anything with any good documentaries. Kiss the Ground on Netflix is a good one. 2040. There's a heap of them out there. And anyone in that sort of regenerative space, like Paul Hawken is another one, a good one to look at. Rich Roll's podcast, he's gotten a few people on that are really good. Just anything that you can look at for any educators in that space that have any credibility behind them. I would suggest not to move away from the people that don't have any real background or real but anyone that does, like the Zach Bushes, the Paul Hawkins and stuff of the world, definitely have a look at at the work that they've done, because it's quite interesting. It'll open up, even if you, like you say, even if you take one thing from that and put it back into your property or your business. I mean, that's a gift in a way. And I think we don't do that enough. We don't open ourselves up to other opportunities. So anything that you can do in that space is only going to be a good thing.
100%. And leads me into any book recommendations for the agricultural farming bookworms out there.
Yeah, this is a a full-on one, if you can get through it. I've only got through 3/4 so far. Call of the Reed Warbler by Charles Massey.
Yep.
It's a beautiful book, and it's all about agriculture and shifting agriculture away from that industrial mindset into one that's more regenerative. But he uses very specific solutions all across New South Wales. He interviewed like 50 farmers, I think, across New South Wales, Queensland, Northern Territory, etc., and applied their case studies. Basically, it was basically like a thesis. He's a farmer himself, but he applied all this knowledge and put it into one book. It's bloody awesome. If you want to know more about fire management, I'd go to Fire Country by Victor Stephenson. He's implemented a lot of Indigenous fire management principles across that Cape York area in particular. And Bruce Pascoe's book, Dark Emu, is quite interesting as well in terms of regenerative agriculture knowledge that used to happen back in the day in the early practices, and stuff that ideas that you might be able to take from that book to implement now. So I think that the more reading that you can do in that space, the better. The Fire Country and Dark Emu is definitely they're sort of easy, quick ones to read. The Call of the Reed Warbler, it's pretty in depth, so be ready for a bit of a big read, that one, with a couple of cups of tea, I reckon.
Unreal. I've got 2 more books to add to my list there, and I've got Dark Emu, but I'm yet to set an eye on it, so I have to crack it open pretty soon.
Yeah, it's a good one, mate. Yeah, but take your time with it. God, it's full on.
Absolutely, I will. But a question that opens up a can of worms or something, just for the next person, I like to ask is, what would you like to ask the next guest on the Farms Advice podcast without knowing their background, what they do, or why they do it?
Oh, good question. I really like your question. Where do you see agriculture in 10 years? I really like your question. What tip could you do to improve ecosystem and agricultural health? Yeah, I think that I could tailor it towards my stuff a bit more. So what tip could you give farmers, landholders, to improve both ecosystem health, ecological health, as well as agricultural productivity? So what's the left hand, I guess, is what I'm saying, is like, what would you like to give back in your lifetime to the land? How would you like to go about, like, what impact? That's a better question. What impact would you like to make in your lifetime on your property?
Beautiful. Well, I can't wait to see what the reaction is for that one. But the question from the last guest is pretty relevant to you, is why are you so passionate about what you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. It relates back to when I was talking about this suicide and the wildlife not coming to the waterhole anymore. I mean, I know that whatever we do to nature, we do to ourselves. This isn't just about my passion for nature or ecology. It's my passion for people and society. I really believe that we have the answers within us, and we just have to unlock that potential. And so my life's purpose, especially the last 5 to 7 years, has been trying to understand that human social element. I mean, I know reasonably well now, I'm always learning, but I know across the context of environmental management and environmental management principles. What I think the world doesn't know is how to unlock that human potential. Is like, how do we get and it goes back to the horse story as well. Is like, how do we bring out the best in people now? How do we act in ways that are not divisive and more, how do we unify industries? How do we unify people? Because we all have different backgrounds, different beliefs. How do we bring people together on a common goal of regeneration, on a common goal of reversing climate change? And my whole life's work, especially the last 5 to 7 years, has been about that, because I'm passionate about people and nature at the same time, and the longevity of the survival of the human population, I guess.
Yeah, well, I don't think you can work in agriculture and not be passionate about what you do. If you're not, you're left behind and you're probably kicked out just as quick as you came in as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Because it's tough. It's a lot of people a lot tougher than what I am up there to be able to endure it day in, day out. So like I'm learning in North Queensland.
Absolutely. Well, Khory, mate, thanks for coming on to Farm Yarns and becoming a part of the Farms Advice alumni. Great to have you in the community, and we'll catch up further down the track and see what you're up to along with your clients and everything else. Thank you for tuning in to the Farms Advice podcast. It is produced by Advert Your Eyes Digital, the agribusiness marketing specialist. Go to farmsadvice.com.au for more information on this episode and the others before, and spread the farm's advice. If you love this episode, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe, as it helps other farmers find us too. But until then, next Tuesday, keep on farming. In the spirit of reconciliation, the Farms Advice podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.